Come on.
Welcome, everybody, to the Cathedral City Planning Commission meeting of October 16th. I will call the meeting of October 16th to order. May we have a roll call?
Commissioner McPhail?
Present.
Commissioner Mead?
Present.
Commissioner Bedard? Here. Vice Chairman Lee?
Present.
Chairman Malakoff?
Present.
Thank you.
And now that we are all here, we will pledge allegiance to our country. Okay, so for our agenda finalization, I understand that we have an emergency item.
Yes, Chairman. And I can introduce this, give you a little bit of an understanding of what this is, and then really put this to the commission if you believe that it meets the criteria. So at the last meeting, the commission moved to appoint 2 members to a subcommittee to review responses to our zoning code update RFP, those being Commissioners McPhail and Bedard. Yesterday, Commissioner Bedard let us know that he would be unavailable for a period of time between October 29th and November 19th. I would not be able to participate in meetings with staff or in interviews with the prospective consultants. The agenda for this meeting was published last week. Had we known this last week, we would have been able to avoid this conflict, but we're now in a position where we do not have one of the 2 subcommittee members available for that process. We could agendize this for your November meeting, but that likely would delay the contract award by a month and potentially put some elements, some aspects of this RFP process at risk. In recognizing that potential risk, we are asking the Commission to consider taking this on as an urgency item tonight. That would require a 2/3 vote of the Commission to place this on the agenda, and then the Commission could decide to appoint another member in place of Commissioner Bedard.
So, do we need a formal motion, or?
Yes.
Make a motion that we put this item on the agenda as an emergency item and item 2B.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can we do roll
Motion
call?
passes.
Can I do roll call vote if you don't mind?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, of course. Commissioner McPhail?
Aye.
And Commissioner Mead?
Aye.
Commissioner Bedard? Commissioner Lee?
Aye.
And Chairman Malakoff?
Aye.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to,
Public comments.
yes, I always think it's funny to read this when there's no public here, but we have to read it. The public is invited to address the Planning Commission on any matter not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on the agenda item, please wait to be recognized under that item. Except for special circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits the Planning Commission or staff from responding or taking action on any comment made by the public unless it pertains to an item that appears on the agenda. All speakers should give their name and city of residence, and please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody on the agenda to speak?
No public comments this evening.
Okay, then we will close the public comments and open the non-public hearing item. Item 2A, General Plan Annual Progress Report, presentation and discussion of the General Plan Annual Progress Report for the calendar years 2023, 2024, Part 1.
All right, good evening, Chair Malakoff and Planning Commissioners. My name is Dom Camps, Associate Planner here at the City. Today I'll be presenting Part 1 of the City's General Plan Annual Progress Report for 2023 and 2024. This item is for your information and discussion. So according to state law, cities are required to prepare an annual progress report on the status and implementation of the general plan for submittal to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. The 2040 Cathedral City General Plan was adopted by the City Council in July of 2021. This will be the first progress report since the adoption of the general plan update. When thinking about the annual progress report, it's important to remember that the general plan is a long-range planning document, which is intended to guide the development of the community and preserve its resources over a approximately 20-year time frame. While it has a long-term perspective, it's not a static document, but is intended to sort of evolve and address the changing needs of the community. But keeping in mind that it's a long-range planning document, it should not be expected that the general plan has been fully implemented so far. The city's general plan is comprised of 13 elements, each of which provides a discussion of the topic at hand, as well as goals, policies, and programs. This APR, or Annual Progress Report, will provide an update on the implementation status of each of the general plan policies and programs contained in these elements for the 2023 and 2024 calendar years. To make reporting on the general plan more digestible, I will be presenting the progress report in 3 parts. So I've grouped the elements sort of thematically to make it easier to understand. These groupings are shown on the slide. Today I will be presenting part 1 of the annual progress report, which covers the 5 elements that are sort of related or under the development umbrella. So these are land use, circulation and mobility, housing, community design, and economic and fiscal health. I will be presenting parts 2 and 3 in subsequent Planning Commission meetings, and the APR will then be presented to the City Council for review and approval before it's submitted to the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. So while this presentation will provide an overview of the progress report, I'd like to note that a checklist has also been prepared that details all of the goals, policies, and programs and the 5 elements that are being discussed today. This checklist provides the implementation status for each policy and program, as well as a description, and the full checklist has been attached to the staff report. This presentation will focus on key areas of activity that the city across departments has undertaken during 2023 and 2024 that implement the policies and programs in these elements. So I'd like to note that the presentation will not be a comprehensive overview of either city activities that have occurred in 2023 and 2024, and it also doesn't comprehensively list all of the policies and programs that have been implemented. It's just an overview for information and discussion. So first off is the development review process. This is a comprehensive review process that the Planning Division applies for new development proposals. This review includes the evaluation of proposals for consistency with the general plan, the zoning ordinance and design guidelines, as well as other applicable regulatory documents such as specific plans. Also considered during the project review process are existing site conditions, required infrastructure improvements, and neighborhood character. External agencies such as Southern California Edison or the Sunline Transit Agency are also consulted as needed. And moving forward, especially as the Planning Division moves its review process online, we are hoping to consult with these external agencies on a more regular basis. So the process informs the staff's preliminary determinations about what level of environmental review will be required, and also informs staff's recommendations to the architectural review committees and the Planning Commission. These activities help to implement general plan policies, including those in the community design, land use, and circulation elements, requiring projects to ensure compliance with design standards and guidelines, account for constraints related to things such as drainage and infrastructure, and to consider implications related to traffic circulation. One example of the development review process in action is the Village at Date Palm. This is a proposal that's currently under review for the North City at Date Palm Drive. The development review process for this project, again, it's still underway, but it's including considerations such as consistency with the North City specific plan, potential implications related to the project's location in FEMA Flood Zone A, coordinating development of the site with the city's plans to improve and widen Date Palm Drive north of the 10, and coordinating the provision of sewer and septic service in an area that currently has limited infrastructure. So the next area I'll discuss is the development entitlement process, which goes hand in hand with the review process. Over the past year, the city has made significant improvements to the development entitlement process, making it more facilitative and efficient. One ongoing initiative is the Development Services Committee, which is comprised of representatives of the Planning Division, Building and Safety Division, Engineering Department, Fire, Police, as well as the City Manager's Office. So through this regular interdepartmental review of new development applications, the Planning Division is able to capture more comprehensive feedback and to capture that feedback earlier in the review and application process. The DSC meetings have increased in frequency from once a month to bi-monthly in order to better serve the development community. Another initiative that has occurred over the course of 2023 and 2024 is the launch of EnerGov and the Citizens Self-Service Portal, or CSS portal. The launch of these services enables residents, business owners, and developers to apply for permits and licenses, to submit plans for review, and to request inspections online. On the back end, the use of EnerGov streamlines the project review and plan check process for staff. These activities implement general plan programs requiring the streamlining and expediting of the development review process and to establish procedures for regular interdepartmental and interagency review. An example of the city's efforts to facilitate the development review and entitlement process is a recent preliminary review application for a proposed commercial development at Ramon Road east of Date Palm Drive. So the applicant for this project submitted their application online through the CSS portal. The project will eventually require a conditional use permit for the 2 drive-through restaurants that are being proposed, but at the city's request, they first applied for a preliminary review application. Through EnerGov, the plans were reviewed by the Development Services Committee, and the plans were marked up using Bluebeam. These marked up plans capture feedback from the planning, building, and engineering departments, and were then returned to the applicant through the portal. So in this instance, the Development Services Committee conveyed comments such as concerns about the access configurations, with the entrance being too close to the neighboring commercial development to the west, concerns about site configuration, placing the drive-through too close to the residential development to the east, as well as concerns about the trash enclosure meeting city standards and ADA requirements. So as a result of this process, the applicant can address the city's feedback ahead of submitting their formal application for the conditional use permit, and can do all of this online without a cumbersome in-person process. So moving on, the next activity is the comprehensive zoning ordinance update that is currently underway. So far, the Planning Division, and in particular Cynthia Schultz, has consulted with staff, committee and commission members, as well as city council members about challenges with the existing code and priorities for the code update. The resulting input has been incorporated into an RFP and scope of work. And once a consultant has been selected, staff will work with this consultant to make sure that the zoning ordinance update reflects and implements the general plan, policies, programs, and goals. The code update will also include an overhaul of the city's design guidelines, which were written in 1989. So overall, the zoning ordinance will make significant contributions to implementing the general plan, including policies requiring updating the community design standards and guidelines and removing barriers to affordable housing, as well as addressing the needs of new industries. Next up is housing. So separate from the general plan annual progress report, the city submitted an annual progress report for the housing element to the Department of Housing and Development in March of this year. So that previous report covered housing production in 2023, and we'll be preparing a similar report on housing production in 2024, which will be due to HCD in, I think, April 1st. During 2023, the city has implemented a few programs that will support housing production. These include updating the city's ADU ordinance, as well as adopting a zoning ordinance amendment to implement Senate Bill 9, which permits 2-unit residential developments and urban lot splits. An example of the implications of these amendments is a recent tentative parcel map application that was submitted to subdivide a 12,000-foot parcel into 2 residential parcels. Senate Bill 9 allows for lot splits in R1 zones to be processed administratively. So in combination with the city's ADU ordinances, the application for this, or the applicant for this project, was able to build 2 single-family homes and 2 accessory dwelling units on what was previously a single lot. Another housing initiative that was undertaken in 2023 and 2024 is the pre-approved ADU program. This was launched just in August of this year, and the pre-approved ADU program provides accessory dwelling unit plans which have already been reviewed and approved by the Building and Safety Department for use by residents of Cathedral City at no cost other than standard permitting fees. The pre-approved plans include 4 floor plan options and 2 options of elevation styles. And the program will negate the costs associated with getting custom plans prepared and will facilitate the construction of ADUs in Cathedral City. These initiatives and code amendments have contributed to the implementation of general plan policies in the land use and housing elements, encouraging infill development and second units on single-family lots. However, there still remains significant progress to be made, both in terms of implementing the policies and programs of the housing element and in facilitating housing production to meet the RHNA allocation for the 2021 to 2029 reporting period. Some examples of housing programs that could be implemented in the future include the establishment of incentives for affordable housing, such as fee waivers and expedited processing, the potential for flexible development standards, which is being explored in the zoning ordinance update, and programs supporting the rehabilitation of the existing housing stock, such as low-interest loans to mitigate displacement for low-income families. So I should note that any of these programs would need approval from the appropriate approval bodies, but these are examples of things that are brought up in the housing element that could be implemented in the future. I'll also note that the housing element emphasizes the ongoing need to maintain partnerships with external organizations such as the Coachella Valley Association of Governments and local nonprofits, and the city's new economic development manager and analyst will be maintaining those relationships. The final activities that I'll highlight in this presentation are engineering and public works projects that are in progress or have been completed in 2023 and 2024. These projects have made significant progress in both implementing the general plan as well as the city's active transportation plan, which was adopted alongside the general plan in 2021. Ongoing projects to implement the active transportation plan include the construction of improvements to the sidewalks and construction of a multi-use trail on Cathedral Canyon Drive from Dinah Shore to the Whitewater River, which is ongoing, as well as the construction of bike lanes on East Palm Canyon from Cathedral Canyon Drive to the Palm Springs boundary. This project's now been completed. Other noteworthy infrastructure projects currently in design or in the construction phase include improvements to Date Palm Drive and Varner Road north of the I-10, which I believe is in the design phase, intersection and road safety projects that are funded by the Highway Safety Improvement Program, the ongoing build-out of CV Link, as well as the widening of the Ramon Road Bridge and Vistachino Bridge in partnership with the City of Palm Springs. So these projects will contribute to the implementation of general plan circulation as well as community design programs, which require the provision of safe and efficient mobility for all modes of transportation, as well as the implementation of the active transportation plan. So that concludes my overview of the key activities that have been undertaken to implement the general plan over the past 2 years. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission receive Part 1 of the 2023 to 2024 General Plan Annual Progress Report for information and discussion, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
So at this time, we can go down the line, and each commissioner can ask questions about the implementation of the policy. We can start with Commissioner Bedard.
Oh, I was trying to gather my thoughts.
You want Commissioner Lee to go first?
Sure.
Oh, I have plenty of thoughts. However, I feel like my dog ate my homework because I think I didn't break it down quite with your presentation. So feel free to tell me that will be in part 2. And I had some general questions first about the way the general plan works. I guess the first was, if I counted it right, there are 39 responsibilities for the Planning Commission throughout the general plan. And what I couldn't work out in a lot of those cases was what we were supposed to do, because it all seemed like a staff action. So for background, can you give me any information about that?
So my understanding is all of the policies or programs that list the Planning Commission as responsible also list the Planning Division as responsible. So these are things that, as we undertake our project review, we should make sure that these projects are consistent with these programs. And when we make notes in our staff reports stating that the project is consistent with the general plan, we're referring to these policies as well as other things in the general plan. So as I see it, the responsibility of the Planning Commission is essentially to, is on the approval side of what the staff does to ensure that it's consistent with the general plan. So we make the findings for you to receive and approve, I suppose.
So that's really the general work that we do is covered in those 39 sections. You looked like you were going to say something.
I would add to it in the sense that, the general plan, it's one of the most fundamental documents for all cities across the state of California, and the Planning Commission has a central role in that, in both the adoption and the maintenance of that plan. And I would say that this is a joint effort between staff, we do the day-to-day work, as well as the Planning Commission that may set those milestones, that may set the general direction that guides our work plan. So I think there's a symbiotic relationship here, and because this is the first time that we've actually had the opportunity to do an annual progress report, show that accountability, I think this is an opportunity for us to have that discussion with the Planning Commission of just how well are we doing, and to create that opportunity for the Planning Commission to say, these are some of the spaces that we ought to move into. There are constraints, we can't do everything. This is a long-range planning document, as the staff has noted, but I think there is an opportunity for the Planning Commission to direct, to a degree, the work that we are doing at a staff level to implement the general plan. But It can't exceed budget, staff resources, or our general ability to do it, but I think that gets to the overall maintenance of the general plan.
The impossible we do at once, miracles take a little longer.
As you've just heard, we've done a lot in the last year, so
Yeah, absolutely.
This is impressive, and we can keep this.
I guess something else in the land use policies in general, which is something that's come up at the last few meetings for us. And I'm really just looking for a little clarification, and that is various references to the Ahwahnee policy. And in the specific plan for Rio Vista Village, and again with the warehousing, we kind of said, I think the general comment was that, we're not looking at that anymore, we're looking at current conditions. So I'm just wondering if that's in the general plan now, do we need to sort of get it out? It does say it's a living document. It's not intended to be permanent, but the amendments to the general plan itself, they have to go back to the city council, presumably.
Yeah, so to remove policies related to that, we would need to bring it to the city council. I think the city will be thinking about community design and related things as we work on the zoning ordinance update. But of course, the zoning ordinance is to implement the general plan. So without amending the general plan, that will not change, and that is still sort of our North Star that's guiding us. Yeah.
Is that something we can consider in the zoning part of this plan?
Yes, and I would say that as we get into the zoning code update, it may become clear that there are amendments needed to the general plan. So I would say
Okay.
that. The Ahwahnee principles, that's part of the new urbanist movement. It still has relevance in places within the city. I would say that the project the Planning Commission heard, it was appropriate for us to perhaps step away from those Ahwahnee principles. But that is something we can get into at a deeper level in the zoning code update.
Okay, and again, another general point, because it comes up in multiple places, which there are words to the effect of we need to consider the needs and wishes of the neighborhood. And we generally, well, it's not that we don't consider them, but things like the Food for Less gas station, we rejected that, but it was reinstated by the city council on appeal. That was in response to the neighborhood concerns. Rosemont was another example where we had a lot of people come and present to us. So how is it we're incorporating that feedback from the neighborhood? I understand that 20 people who show up here one night cannot set policy, but I'm wondering what that means in terms of the general plan, how we're supposed to do this work.
I would interpret it in sort of two ways. One is, of course, just the public hearing process is sort of the forum that we take that feedback and incorporate it into the decision making. But also, again, I think the zoning ordinance update will be thinking about how can the design guidelines and standards be flexible or be calibrated in a way that they can cater to specific neighborhood characters rather than necessarily being sort of a blanket across the city. Again, this process is underway, so I'm not sure exactly what the results of the update will be, but
Okay.
these are things that are being considered about how they can be more responsive to individual neighborhood needs or characters.
Can I add something to that? I think when you it's important to take into account what the neighborhood thinks, but I think that you have to balance that with the reasonableness, because there's some things that people are going to come in that may meet every box of our standards and everything, and people are just not going to like it no matter what. Mm-hmm. And I think we have to balance the community's input with meeting the code requirements and that that it's the right project for the right site. And, sometimes a project can still get approved, but include community input that can help improve the project. So just taking a generic situation, there could be some kind of hotel project that was, being built and the neighbors were concerned and, it gets continued and through the input, they staggered the stories so that it wouldn't cast a shadow on the residential neighborhood that was adjacent to it, or that they did certain sound attenuations. I mean, that's still accommodating the neighborhood, but it's not eliminating the project. So I think that, there's a common sense part of that too. And we also have to think about, the future of the city and how we're coming across from the dais in those situations.
Moving on to housing and away from that particular point, I did notice the references to Desert Bloom in the report, and we generated, or we have agreement for 15 deed-restricted units. But it also mentions there will be consideration of other ways to encourage that. I'm thinking carrot and stick here. We need to get more of that going on. So again, that will be in the zoning or?
Yeah, I think housing is a major focus in the zoning ordinance update, and including thinking about tools. Again, the zoning ordinance is intended to sort of implement the general plan. So if the general plan lays out various housing needs or at a high level, more affordable housing, more efficient use of land, the zoning ordinance will hopefully provide tools to make those things happen.
As well, we're also not waiting 2 years to make all of these changes happen. We're actually taking forward a study session to City Council on October 23rd on housing. And we're talking about housing's role with economic development. So that would be a very interesting presentation to listen to if you're interested in housing implementation. We are tying into the housing element and some of the specific language that's in the housing element. We're also noting that in our housing element annual progress report, I think we demonstrated that we're at 10% of our arena numbers through the first 3 years, which is astonishingly low. We're not doing a very good job just waiting for the market to come to us. So we're laying that out for council and are looking to have that policy discussion with City Council later this month.
I think you know that I already advocated to the council for an inclusionary housing policy, but I don't know that, in my 3 minutes I had much effect on the city council. But I do believe that is something that we need if we're going to get enough action for the RHNA component in the housing element. So let me end on one other thing. So we've got various things about things not directly related to housing, but we have standards for things like parking and so on. Is it likely, or is it even possible for us to have EV standards for housing developments? So that we require at least the provision of power and so on for housing, and particularly in multi-family units, that there is some provision in the parking area for that.
I believe the Title 24 standards are sort of phasing in requirements related to that, and so they may require for multifamily that there are a certain amount of EV charging ready parking spaces, and I suspect that will ramp up to having EV spaces required. But I don't know that it couldn't also occur at the local planning level as well, but I think those things are being phased in by the state.
Okay, good. Thank you. That's all for me.
Thank you so much for those comments. Commissioner Bedard, are you ready?
So the general plan is interesting. I've not been able to read the entire thing, but there's a lot of scattered language in it about well-being and things of that sort for our community. But as a mental health therapist, I kind of want to ask it what that means. I don't see it described. I don't see a footnote. I don't see something that says well-being for our community is. And I know that there is a movement in architecture and in design to go, I know we mentioned like community spaces was a big thing about development in the plan previously, but it really wasn't implemented. So my curiosity is, how do we bring those elements to make our city a place where people want to hang out? When we build a strip mall, and they're inevitable, they're part of our culture, they're not my favorite thing, but if we can make a strip mall actually have qualities and elements of well-being for people, whatever that means, how do we define that?
I do think that's a bit of a million-dollar question, but I also think that as we work on overhauling the design guidelines in particular, that will be an avenue to come up with what does the city consider well-being, and how can our city's design facilitate that, including in public spaces or how people get around the city, things like that. So I don't have a concise
there are
definition for
sort
you
of
right
like
now.
obvious things, like when you look at that building, is it pleasing? Obvious things like, does it feel good walking in the parking lot? Does it feel safe? Is it well lit? Is there color affects people's emotional well-being, right? So different things like that to somehow incorporate trees, all that. So yeah, I hear you. I'm hoping that we're going to get more clarity on what that actually is and how that's actually implemented as a city, because as a city, we've been a very drive-by city. And to have a place where people want to stop and they want to come in, they want to hang out, they want to, hey, I just went to this cool new development, I'm not even necessarily going to go to the store, I just wanted to check it out because it looks so cool, right? That type of stuff. Then there's another thing I've been hearing about and I'm not very educated on it. I don't know if this is the proper place to bring it up. Palm Springs cleared something from their old bylaws, general plan, different legal things that were with the city. They were, I believe they're being referred to as the pink laws, that actually, they weren't just LGBT focused or anti-LGBT focused, but they were also racially focused and different things of that sort. Is that, I'm not sure, I haven't seen it in our general plan, where it restricted, like, in Palm Springs, it restricted the development of a LGBT gay business. You literally could not build a gay business or put a gay business in Palm Springs, which is why the clubs and the bars that are in Palm Springs are on Arenas, which is Indian land. The Indians were fine with it, the city didn't want it, right? It also, what happened with, Section 14, I think, with all the problems with that type of stuff. I'm curious if we're looking at our laws that influence our general plan and the implementation of our general plan and saying, oh, we need to take these old laws off the books, such as I don't want to get too political, but a law that was recently used in Arizona to actually define women's rights, right? From 1849. Like, are we looking at that as part of the general plan review?
So currently, in this particular presentation, I was focused on reporting on implementation of the general plan. I did not come across anything that seemed to me to be sort of discriminatory laws in that way. And I also certainly think it's the intent of the general plan to make sure that we live in an inclusive city and the city continues to be inclusive.
Absolutely.
But again, not to keep deferring everything to the zoning ordinance update, but that is our opportunity to make sure that we continue to implement the general plan in a way that is inclusive for everyone. So.
Commissioner, just to let you know, we're a younger city. We got incorporated fairly young, so we don't have a lot of those older things in there, but if you ever find anything in there, advise us as soon as possible.
I was speaking with some people who actually they live in Cathedral City, but worked on these pink laws repeal in Palm Springs. And they did say that there are a few, I haven't been able to get them. So I'm curious what, I could tell you're biting at the tongue.
No. So just, I think like the biggest part, and I really appreciate all the questions because I think that a lot of the community, even if they're seeing just online, they don't really understand maybe the point of a general plan. And I know that some of the language, as you mentioned, is a little ambiguous, open to interpretation, but that is kind of the point. The one thing I did want to mention is that we did just update this in 2021, so it is, that's pretty recent as far as general plans go. There are some people, like, we're updating some for other clients that go back to, like, early 2000s. We're just really behind. So all of those things do come into effect as far as like what the recent changes in law were, you know, what we need to consider, what the state is requiring us to consider. I want to say that maybe, you know, and maybe this is something you and I can discuss as well just to get a little more insight offline, but, you know, anything related to, I'm going to just refer to them as pink laws, that kind of might have been a policy aspect that maybe wasn't addressed in the general plan, but could somehow, you know, be addressed as we look through the zoning code or see how we can implement that. Maybe there's an interpretation that we have a concern with in the general plan. So we can definitely keep that in mind as we kind of go through this.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mead.
I just have two things. So many good things have already been brought up. One, with the new ADU program and the pre-approved designs, have we seen anyone take advantage of that? Are we seeing people put in permits?
We've received a number of inquiries, but I don't believe that anyone has submitted an application yet.
Okay, but it seemed like putting that out there did generate some interest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. And then I know housing's a big thing, and obviously that's going to be part of zoning and the housing element. And obviously, as we start to build more and to try to meet those numbers, a lot of it's, I assume, a lot of it's going to be multifamily. And one of the things that I just have, like it's not a pet peeve, but a concern about, just from my experience, being both a renter and a homeowner, is that there does seem to be a big divide between homeowners and renters. And there's often this misconception that renters are transient, they don't care about the community, they don't they don't know what's going on, they're not engaged. And I think, some of that could come down to individual people, but I also think it's very rare for cities to do a good job to really do outreach to renters. And I think that can cause that kind of division, because really it's hard to feel like you have a stake in a community if you have no idea what's going on. And I know that our notifications, and that's true for most cities, really only notify the property owner. So if you live in an apartment building, the landlord gets notified, the people don't. So I'm just wondering, as we do build up as a city with more multifamily, if we can look at, and I don't know if this is through the zoning code or, but figuring out some way to engage renters, make sure they know what's going on, so that we don't kind of have that divide. Because I know from where I lived in LA, there was always this kind of sense where we don't want to have a multifamily building next to us because we know they're going to bring down the quality of life because they're not engaged. So I think we can kind of maybe head off some of that and try to make a, just put aside some of those divisions, or try to, if we can somehow figure out a way to engage people. So just my thought.
I think that's a great point. I don't have any answers for current initiatives, but I think it's something the staff should take note of. And as well as things continue to move online, maybe there are avenues that we can do more outreach using either the city's website or things like that to catch a wider array of people.
Great, thanks.
Commissioner McPhail.
Commissioner Mead took my question about ADU plans, and which is good to hear that might be some interest in that. I guess just to go back up top for a second, the process that we're going through with both the annual progress report for the general plan and also the progress report for the housing element. In both cases, in the case of the general plan, it goes to the Office of Planning and Research. So you send it off to them. Do they get back to you to say, this is all aligned, this is going well, or we see some problems, we suggest you fix this? Do you get any feedback from that office, for example, when you do this process?
That's actually a good question. I know the housing element annual progress report has kind of some stricter requirements around it, and that one is certainly required, I think, to maintain a certified housing element.
Right.
I'm not sure if we'll hear back from the OPR about the general plan annual progress report. My understanding is that one of the main reasons that the state requires or wants cities to be doing this is just for transparency to the public, reporting to the public. So I think that's kind of the primary objective.
And then, secondly, in terms of the housing element, it goes to HCD, and I guess they look at the progress and they might come back and say, step it up, you need to work on this policy or this program to make things happen. They might give you concrete suggestions.
I'm not certain about that, and from the one that we submitted in April, it was primarily getting confirmation that they received our progress report. So I don't know that they give kind of city-by-city feedback necessarily.
I think as long as we're submitting it to HCD, we're fulfilling our requirements, and I think this is a case where no news is good news. We want to stay in their good grace.
Well, having worked as a consultant on the City of Mission Viejo's housing element, I know they're hard taskmasters, so if you haven't heard anything, that's probably a good thing.
The sixth cycle was extremely difficult for many local agencies, and we're only hearing that it's going to get more and more difficult. We're also seeing legislation that continues to empower HCD, that gives them more authority and as well increases the penalties. You probably have heard about the builder's remedy. There was legislation this last session that makes changes to the builder's remedy to make that a more effective tool for developers in cities where they do not have a certified housing element. So we want to be in a position where we maintain our certified housing element and we maintain that local control. It's only getting more difficult.
Yeah. In the case of Mission Viejo, their fifth cycle target was something like 200 and something units. sixth cycle was 2,200, like a tenfold increase. And I imagine that was probably a similar leap that you guys are expected to do as well, or we are expected to do as well. So yeah, I'll jump into some of the housing element stuff. And if I'm getting too in the weeds, just say, stop. So our arena is 2549 units in the sixth cycle, which goes from 2022 to 29. So that's roughly 318 units a year. And it's good to see that in terms of the permitted units, which is what they count, that each year we're getting better. You know, it was 58 the first year, 67 the second, 133 this year. So we're ramping up, but yes, we're at 10%. You also showed in your report, you had entitled units and then permitted units. I don't know if there's any general rule of thumb about this, but do the, 276 entitled, is it fairly inevitable they will become permitted, or they may not? It depends on market forces and other things, whether they move to that phase. We can't count on those becoming part of the arena.
That's right, and I suspect that's why HCD gives you an elaborate Excel spreadsheet to fill in, and it,
Yes.
it breaks things out by entitled versus building permits versus certificates of occupancies that have been issued, and I think it's for that reason, because while it's good to track the entitled units, it's not guaranteed that they will be built, so.
Right. This is maybe a general question for the staff. Is there one policy or a couple of policies you think that could help us increase that 10% to get closer to where we should be? Is there a couple of things that we in the Planning Commission can do through recommendations to City Council that would help us gin that up?
I was going to suggest that there's not necessarily, because the real rub in this is not the policies, but how do we partner with the right parties that are knowledgeable and experienced in constructing affordable housing. You have to have a builder that knows this process to reach out to the right agencies to receive funding.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is based on tax credit, financing, what financing or what incentives the cities have, land availability. There's a lot of factors that go into affordable housing, and so I think we do have policies. It's just how do we get to that next step of actually implementing?
Right. I noticed in the report it said that it assumes a certain breakdown of the different income levels for the units that are in place so far. I was wondering, is there any tracking or follow-up with those developers to see if our assumptions are real about how many are low income, how many are moderate? Should we check in to see if that's actually happening? And also in terms of the ADUs, it's the same thing, where assumptions are made that so many are going to be low income, so many moderate, above moderate, and so on. I was wondering, like, perhaps when you're getting applications for ADUs and you're getting all sorts of information, would maybe a question to ask them be, what sort of rent are you thinking of asking? So you'd have an idea of whether they are indeed low, moderate, and so on. I was just wondering, are we doing any tracking of those assumptions?
We don't have anything in place to sort of follow up with developments to see if what affordability level they end up being. But to your second point about asking that for ADU applications, that's actually something we've built into the new application. So when people apply using the CSS portal for a building permit for an ADU, we do ask, to their knowledge, what their anticipated rent level would be. Of course, it's not guaranteed that that's
Right.
what it will end up being, but it helps us track. So
Yeah. And you have
we
some
can make
data
better
to tell
assumptions.
HCD this is what we're being told, at least.
Yeah, so, and I think that was implemented in July or August of this summer. So for the 2024 housing element APR, we'll have at least 6 months of the year with better data at our hands.
That's good. And just a little point.
Just add to that.
Sorry, yes.
There's actually an annual ownership certification process to kind of check in with HCD as far as the affordability and making sure that the renters in those units actually meet the qualifications, because it could be low, very low, moderate, whatever the case might be, and those numbers will change annually. So it might not be necessarily that the city is very involved in all of that, and to some extent we could be, but it is an annual requirement of the property owner
40 ADU
for all affordable housing.
or affordable?
And finally, I guess I was just, one of the documents referenced an Appendix B, which was going to show the sites in the housing element, and there was no Appendix B attached, so I couldn't see what the sites actually were. So I was wondering if that could be sent to us or posted somewhere.
Yes, I think in the housing element that's on the city's website, one of the versions has that appendix, but we can make sure to send it to you directly so you can look at that.
Thank you.
I think as we have this discussion on housing and affordable housing, I think it is important to distinguish between, say, your market rate housing, your naturally occurring affordable housing, and then deed-restricted affordable housing. That deed-restricted affordable housing is an area that we've really struggled with. We have not seen a lot of those. You've mentioned Desert Bloom. We're still working on getting that project built, but that's an area where we are lagging. So I think the data that's in here is based on certain assumptions. It's based on knowledge that we have, but the information that council has shared really pertains to those deed-restricted affordable housing units. So is there a policy out there that we need to pursue, that we need to chase? I think it's a matter of how can we work more in that space? How can we encourage more of those developers to come into the city? And just to expand on that a little bit, there are challenges. The city is not the easiest city to work in. We have a lot of tribal land in the city. We also have land that's without a lot of infrastructure, north of the 10, for instance. Those are barriers and additional challenges. For those tribal lands, we couldn't count that towards our arena numbers. So those are shifted to other properties in the city. So I think we do have some barriers to the construction of housing, to the construction of affordable housing that we need to continue to work through. And I think the discussion that we're having with council on the 23rd, that's a start to breaking down some of those barriers, to looking at what the city's role is, how we can motivate the private sector, and how we can perhaps encourage the development of more of these types of housing that I think we're talking about here, particularly those that may be guaranteed or that may have those deed restrictions that preserve that for a longer period of time, the 45 years, the 55 years for owner and renter occupied affordable housing.
Mayor, so I think this is more part of the zoning than a general plan, but I know I brought it up before, the idea of I would like our city to be more environmentally progressive. And I know low-income housing is an issue, and I actually helped build a house that the entire cost of the house that met the highest standards of construction was only $3,000. Sustainable, green, environmental, super cool. And the entire house cost $3,000 to build. If we're really talking affordable housing and we really want affordable housing, then there are housing methods and ways of building out there that will do that, that aren't necessarily stick frame housing. And again, I think this is part of more part of zoning than the general plan. And if we really care and we really want to do things, and we really want to be more forward thinking, and we really want to be more environmental or sustainable or all that type of stuff, then there are ways to actually do that. So I don't know how to reflect that into the general plan, but that's part of my excitement for why I want to participate with zoning. So.
Okay. So for me, the general plan's the policy document, the zoning interprets the general plan. So, the zoning implements the general plan. And so the general plan is already a document that we're working with. And, a lot of the policies in there are very open to interpretation. So I think, as all the other commissioners have voiced, concern over certain issues, that a lot of these issues could be taken up to the zoning ordinance through what's already in the general plan. One of the things that I'm always interested in is equity. And there's a there's a doctrine called the Mount Laurel Doctrine from Mount Laurel, New Jersey, of all places. And what it said was, on a statewide basis, that all parts of the state should share in the implementation of their housing goals for affordable housing. And how I think that that's relevant to what we're talking about today is that when we did the general plan land use element for the new land use designations, it seemed like some neighborhoods took on more than the others did. And I hope that when we look at how we're going to implement providing housing in Cathedral City that's affordable, that each neighborhood can get their fair has their fair share of it, and it's not all put in one neighborhood. So, I know of one situation where, they took a parcel that was R1 and they made it R3, and then with a density bonus, that could become very significant. So, it seems like there's a few neighborhoods that take more on than others do in the city, and I'm hoping that through the zoning ordinance, we can kind of equal that out. One of the things, in my career that I've run into, and I've been on both sides of the issue for multiple family housing where it affected me, and I had one viewpoint which really surprised me, but I had a specific viewpoint on it. And then I've had other viewpoints on it where I was representing the city or a city, and and I had to take in all accounts. But I think one thing that I've always said, that apartments and multiple family housing are not bad land uses in themselves, but they should come with performance standards that prevent them from becoming an eyesore and in future code enforcement issues. So I'm not going to say who in this city, but there's certain places where things were built and then they just abandoned everything. They let all the landscaping die. They have exposed wires everywhere. They don't filter their tenants in any way. They don't do anything about noise. So, but there are no performance standards on that project. So I'm hoping that in the future, when we do apartments, regardless of whether they're entry level or workforce or whatever we want to, it's politically correct to call them today, that we put those performance standards that they keep the architecture up to standard, they keep the landscaping maintained, that they don't allow junk vehicles, they don't allow junk on the balconies. Those kinds of things keep it into a nice neighborhood. One builder that I think is successful at it is National Core. I've been to a few of their properties, including the ones here, and they do a good job with it, I think. So I'm hoping that when we do the zoning ordinance, that we incorporate those performance standards in it, and to ensure that they, into perpetuity, are a good land use that contributes to the community. The other thing that, I had two more issues. One is, we did a compass blueprint for Date Palm Drive, but I think that it turned out that it was really unenforceable or unworkable, and it never got adopted. But a lot of cities in Southern California, including Coachella, West Hollywood, and I think even in Northern California, the city of Livermore did it for their downtown. They got the grant from the regional government for a Compass Blueprint grant, and they consolidated the general plans. And I think that would help us on Date Palm Drive to have the flexibility that we need and not have a mishmash of general plans going from East Palm Canyon all the way up to the freeway or beyond the freeway.
Clarify what this is, the Compass Blueprint? Sorry.
Compass Blueprint is a grant program that can be applied for through the regional government. In our case, it would be SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments. And it's specifically to update downtowns or main corridors and to have consistent standards. Because a lot of times, and we're not the only ones, a corridor could have 7 or 8 different specific plans that don't have much to do with each other because they were done over time in different times. La Quinta is in the process of consolidating theirs. They didn't do it through a Compass blueprint, but they're consolidating their specific plans, and they called it the reimagination of 111. So it's just something to think about for Date Palm Drive, because we have so many specific plans, and then that relates back to what Commissioner Mead said, even though I was sitting outside, I was listening. Commissioner Mead said about the warehouses that she asked about the policy, that the section was updating, but how does that relate back to the policy of livability and being part of the neighborhood and having sitting areas? So if we could come up with, some kind of grant that we could bring all those specific plans together to have a consistent set of standards across Date Palm Drive, I think that it would be difficult, but
So I'd like to speak on that just for a moment here. And I think it's a good idea, and it's something that we can discuss a little bit more, but there may be a simpler approach. And that is, if we evaluate the specific plans that we have on the Date Palm corridor, it may be the case that we don't need most of those specific plans anymore, and that we could look at a conventional zoning district through the zoning code update to provide that same outcome. And I think that's something that we have talked about at a staff level, that we've put into the RFP. How do we revitalize the Date Palm corridor? How do we change up that land use composition and mix? Because right now our hands are tied. We're not seeing uses go in. We're not seeing development happen. And I think the specific plans, in a way, are part of that problem. So whether it's Compass Blueprint or just looking at a repeal and a reliance on conventional zoning, I think there is a solution there. And I think as we get into the zoning code update, maintaining that as a focal area, an area of interest for the commission, an area of interest for us as we're going through that project. We want to see change happen on that corridor. Let's make sure that we're calibrating the standards, that we're calibrating the outcomes in the zoning code update to direct energy that way.
I think that's an excellent approach. And in my mind, specific plans weren't made for like 2 or 3 blocks. They were meant to be over large areas like the North City specific plan.
Yes.
And so I wouldn't include that in what I said. And when I worked in Redlands, they had the county of San Bernardino, the city of Loma Linda, and the city of Redlands got together, and they had one called the East Valley Corridor Specific Plan. All 3 jurisdictions agreed somehow. I don't know how that ever happened, but they did. And it's still in existence. It's a pretty good document. But the ones that are just for like 1 block, those never seem to work well over time. The last thing I have, going back to like equity, for when we do the zoning, and when Commissioner Bedard was talking about wellness, or well-being, is that there's already language in our zoning ordinance about, I don't believe we call it a battered women's shelter anymore. Now the correct wording is battered spousal shelter. And there's already language for like emergency situations for an emergency and temporary shelters, but I think that we should make it so that if the need arose and we needed to have some kind of facility, that we could be able to process that in a way that's safe, because they have to be very secretive to where they are, and not have it be a conditional use and have it be a permitted use, which would mean then you don't have to have a public hearing. But I think that's a social good that's needed, and it's something that we could do and provide that social need that I think is really important. At least have the opportunity there that if one of the groups in town needs to relocate, they could find a hospitable location here. The last thing I had was, I don't know how this works exactly. I think CV Link is a great idea. I use CV Link, but I wish that there was more literature that showed how the different segments connect. And when you go to the website, I can't make sense of it. It's like some GIS person in a twisted way put something on there that nobody could understand. And, you know, usually I understand those twisted things, but in this case, it's beyond me. So like, I know, you know, I can park my car on the side of the road of Vistacino and walk down to Ramon Road and back. But, you know, I'd sure like to know where the other routes are, especially in Cathedral City and Palm Springs now that, you know, they're coming closer to a reality, and understand where the others are too in the other cities. So if that's something in the director's meeting that you could bring up in a diplomatic way, you know, or talk to them one-on-one. It would be good to have that as a resource so that people knew exactly where the routes were.
Yeah, I work with CVAG specifically on the CV Link, and you'll see a lot of changes, especially with all the pieces that are being constructed right now. They have a significant contract with Granite that's putting together all the Palm Springs pieces, our pieces, and they're going quite rapidly. And down Valley too, so they're working on their websites to make them a little more comprehensive.
It'll be good.
So, but I'll also pass that on, that it's very
In a diplomatic
disjointed
way.
right now.
Diplomatic's important.
So, yeah, the challenge is that it's not necessarily ours, but we can make strong suggestions, so. But it's coming along pretty good, and our piece should be done toward the end of the year, so it's looking good.
But this was very informative. Did you have another question?
Just one quick point. I thought you might be getting bored now. So in the housing element report, you did mention that SCAG report, which was used to apportion the ADUs. And it occurred to me exactly what is it that they're defining as an ADU in this case? Because we now see every PUD adding an ADU to every housing unit. And so right now, in plan, we've got what was it called? Nirvana, that's it. And Mountain something or other, off Ramon.
View Estates.
Yeah. And they're, between them, they'll add 216 ADUs. We're not going to apply this theory to them, are we?
No, I mean, it is a deficiency with using that SCAG report. I think as we collect data from the building permits on what the intended affordability is, that will help. Also, when we did the housing element APR, we tried to account for that by applying the lower income affordable units to ones that were not in those sort of master plan communities, understanding that those are more likely to be market rate unless, you know, otherwise stated.
I'd be highly surprised if they're ever actually rented. But yes, they certainly wouldn't be for low-income families. Yeah, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.
One more question. You mentioned part of what you were, at some point we were talking about housing, refurbishment of existing housing stock to make sure that they maintained, I think you said something about maintaining their affordability. Could you talk a little bit more about that? That was a surprise to me.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on what that would be. This is one of the policies that's in the housing element right now. And so it's something that we could explore, I suppose, what that could look like. But I suppose the reason I included in this presentation without being an expert on what it is that beyond building more housing, it's to make sure our existing housing stock continues to be used and serves our population.
Thanks.
Is it to make homeowners aware of grants they could apply for to help with improvements to keep their housing?
I believe so, and I think this particular policy was about low interest rate mortgages or loans rather for low-income families to make these improvements to keep their housing.
So Chair Malakoff, before we close out this discussion, I just want to thank Ms. Camps for the exhaustive work that she's done on this. This was not an easy lift. This was really the first time that we have gone through this exercise. All of the data in the report that was prepared by your planner. This is the first time that we've gone through this level of effort, analyzing our general plan, analyzing our policies, and really putting together this accountability report. So I really appreciate the work that she's done. This is elevating the work that we do, elevating the work that you do, increasing that openness and transparency of our general plan process, and I really appreciate the work that she's done getting us here. Thank you.
I had that on my list, but you beat me to it. Very comprehensive work, and it's very obvious about the amount of time you put into it. So congratulations on a very well-done report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Now that you know you have to do this annually, as you go through the year, you should have a little folder that you kind of drag stuff into, and then all you have to do at the end is just compile it into, hey, this is meeting that part of the general plan. Put a note in this.
I do think it'll be much easier in subsequent years.
So moving on the choosing a planning commission member to serve on the consultant selection committee for the zoning update, can we get the dates so that we pick somebody that can go?
That's actually here.
Yes, of course. So these dates are still a little bit of a work in progress, a moving target, but we were looking at arranging a meeting with staff and the selection or the subcommittee between October 29th and 31st to review the proposals, and then possibly bringing in a consultant or consultants for interviews the week of November 4th or November 11th.
Do you have a time of day that this would be?
Not yet.
No?
Not yet, no. We're looking at the 29th, 30th, or 31st, generally just to give the selection committee 2 weeks to review the proposals and to be able to come together for a discussion and scoring.
And what was in November 4th?
We were looking at interviews with potential consultants the week of November 4th or the week of November 11th, recognizing that the 11th is Veterans Day.
What days of the week are the 29th through the 31st? Do you have any?
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Oh, Tuesdays.
31st is Halloween. Yeah, for the cost.
Do we have any volunteers to join Mr. McPhail?
Sadly, I have no life, and so I'm available those dates.
And
I feel like I've taken on a little too much since I didn't opt to do it last time, so I think I'm happy for you to do it.
Would you like to first or nominate?
I will nominate Danny Lee, Commissioner Lee.
I will
Oh,
second.
do you want to do it?
Oh, did you want to do it?
Danny, if you want to do it, that's fine.
I'm fine. I'm perfectly happy to do it. I'm not going to force myself on anyone.
I think you'd be a good person for it, so go ahead.
I nominate Commissioner Lee for the now open seat on the, what is the committee called? The commission?
Just call it the subcommittee of the
The
planning
subcommittee.
the selection committee.
Okay.
Roll call?
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. So Commissioner McPhail.
Aye for the second Brit.
Commissioner Mead.
Aye.
Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Lee.
Aye.
Commissioner Bedard.
Aye.
And Chairman Malik.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioner reports. I wanted to just say this was a great meeting, but on a different note, John, I wanted to compliment Deanna and Carlos on a job well done on shifting sands. It was an area that really needed some help, and the new landscaping just really looks good. So it's really a job well done. If any of you are down there, I suggest you check it out because it looks very good.
Nice.
Other commissioner comments?
a big congratulations on everybody for the Roadrunner Motors ribbon cutting today. That was super significant for us. It's awesome.
And city attorney comments.
I have no comments tonight, thank you.
Okay, and staff comments.
Sure, a couple of comments. So for the benefit of the overall commission, we did get 5 submissions for the zoning code update. And the two of you, of course, are going to get into the details of that, but very, very pleased with the response to the RFP. I think that puts us in an excellent position moving forward. So beyond that, we are also looking at scheduling a joint meeting between the ARC and the Planning Commission for next Tuesday, October 22nd. This is intended to really be a tour of recently completed projects to foster some discussion between the ARC, Planning Commission, allow you to review what worked, what may not have worked, and the timing couldn't be better going into the zoning code update, because that's the opportunity for us to start to make some of these changes, doing things like incorporating well-being and the quality of development into our standards so that we can better articulate what we expect as developers work with us. So right now we have a list of projects. This may get pared down, but we have The Habit, Dave's Hot Chicken, Denny's, Newport 17, Newport 5, Atomic Buds, Desert Lexus, Veterans Village, the Quick Quack Car Wash, various cannabis uses on Perez Road. 2 projects that were approved at my level that the ARC and Planning Commission did not see, but we're inviting feedback on. That's the Tortillas Restaurant and Casablanca Restaurant. And the recently heard Ramon Convenience Store. So we're open to ideas. If there's projects that you want to see that I haven't mentioned, let me know. If there's someone here that you don't want to talk about, let me know. we can take that feedback and really work to build this final agenda.
So,
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I'm not going to be able to make it just because I work. So would it be possible to get a list, and then I would just want to kind of look them up and drive by? Maybe I can just send some thoughts by email.
Is
Of
this
course.
our bus tour that we're doing?
We're getting a van, yes.
Okay.
So we're going to load everyone up in a van. We're going to go out, look at these various sites. We'll stop, we'll get out of the van, we'll
Great.
walk it, we'll evaluate that. We'll do as much as we can in a 3-hour period of time. Right now, we're aiming 9 to noon for this tour, but really we'll try to maximize the use of that time. I've done this before in other cities. It's a great opportunity to reflect on work that you've seen, and I think I've heard this comment that, you know, once you approve it, what happens? This is the opportunity to really reflect on that, and I think to opine on, you know, some of the positives, and if there's something in there that you really don't like, you know, it's an opportunity to talk about it with the group and for us to think about how we can correct that and make that change.
And we're meeting right out in the back parking lot, or where are we meeting for that?
This is a work in progress, so we will get you the final instructions, but right now, October 22nd, 9 a.m., I would anticipate that we're going to meet here at City Hall. We'll give you a specific meeting spot. We'll load up in the van and head out from there. And yes, we'll have a final tour and be able to make that available.
so a few years ago when I was on the Parks Commission, city manager organized a similar sort of tour for us for the DRD and out to India and their various locations. But he had concerns about Brown. Are we going to be okay being in one bus?
Yes.
Okay.
We will advertise this as a public meeting. We will post the locations that we will be going to, and if a member of the public shows up here at City Hall and wants to ride along, we'll get them in the van.
Yeah, and you guys are all very well knowledgeable. You know the ins and outs of Brown Act, so there's nothing to worry about.
All right.
Well, and other than that, then it's 7:17, and we'll adjourn until our next meeting, which is November 6th,
For the third.
November 6th and November 20th.
There's not one the end of October.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.